Oil exports are the lifeblood of Russia's economy. And we've seen historically, every time Russia's oil revenues fall drastically, Russia finds itself in trouble very quickly. That was true in 1988. That helped lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union, became insolvent. 1998, which led to the default of Russia, and 2008, where oil prices collapsed as a consequence of the global financial crash.
No,
That was less severe, more temporary, created fewer difficulties, but it did create difficulties. The real fear for Russia now, if the West can engineer this, is a sustained long-term fall in the lifeblood, those daily petrodollar revenues that Russia relies upon to fuel its war economy.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has welcomed Donald Trump's proposal for a Russia-US summit and suggested a new location in the Middle East for the talks. Speaking at a meeting with the president of the UAE, Putin said the Arab nation would be an entirely suitable venue for the meeting, but stopped short of confirming it would be the host. This came hours after Trump said he would meet Putin even if the Russian leader refused to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Dr Nigel Gould Davis is a senior fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies and former British ambassador to Belarus. And he was also the former head of the UK's economics department in Moscow. Nigel, hello.
Good morning.
It looks increasingly likely that this meeting might happen, doesn't it?
Events and rhetoric certainly seem to be pushing in that direction, but this has been such a strange and bumpy journey, or to change the metaphor, such a rapidly turning kaleidoscope. Every few months, weeks, and even days, the kaleidoscope turns and the jangling pieces fall into a different shape. There seems to be no firm or clear commitment yet. But if it does go ahead, it's a really startling retreat for Donald Trump. There had been a drum roll in the past few weeks, as you know, to today's deadline that he had imposed for Russia to agree a ceasefire, and some quite significant threats that Trump was making for the first time. Now it seems we face the prospect of Putin not being punished, but in effect rewarded, despite his failure to observe Trump's deadline. A bilateral summit with Trump would be an enormous victory for Putin and an opportunity that he would use to the full. So let's see where things go. Nothing seems to be in the bag yet. It's still more talk rather than commitment. But if it does go ahead, this is a striking, and for Ukraine, I would say, and for Europe too, a very alarming development.
Well, yes, as you point out, if Zelensky isn't there, I'm just wondering if Putin's likely to make any concessions in these negotiations with Trump and America. If it's not, he thinks he's making gains on the battlefield, doesn't he?
He thinks he's making gains on the battlefield. He thinks he's making gains in respect of the West's unity as well, which is no less important for the course of this war. I think a lot of people in the West miss the underlying confidence with which Putin continues to speak publicly to Russian audiences about the war. He may be wrong in that assessment, but that is his assessment. And the other thing to make very clear here is the extent of Putin's own commitment, one would have to say historical psychological obsession about achieving his objective of subordinating Ukraine. This is not a small or even a medium objective. This is defining his presidency and the way he sees his legacy in history. And the only thing that's more important to Putin, the only higher priority he has than subordinating Ukraine, is to ensure the continuing survival and stability of his own regime at home. And it follows from that only at the point where continuing the war were to cast doubt on the stability of his regime is he likely to make any real concessions rather than, at most, very brief temporary tactical concessions.
And
So
Nigel, I was just wondering if do we get a sense that the Russian economy is finally starting to feel the pinch from some of the tariffs that have been imposed, and indeed now that the sort of secondary tariffs, for instance, on India, who've been refining Russian oil, I mean, will that put enough pressure on Putin to at least agree to some form of concessions?
the tariffs are a curiosity, really. The economic instrument of choice up to now, from the United States and Europe, has been sanctions. Sanctions are, in a sense, an infinite tariff. They mean you cannot export or you cannot import at all certain categories of goods. Tariff is the Trumpian means of trying to change trade balances. And now he's trying to use it as a geopolitical instrument. It won't really work. It doesn't impose difficult choices in the first instance on Russia. It imposes them on India, which is an important partner of Russia, but also of the United States and the West as well. I very much doubt that would work. But on the fundamental question that you raise about the strains on the Russian economy, unquestionably, yes, we are seeing cumulative erosion of capacity and resources. And the best economic minds in Russia are certainly quietly alarmed about this and making their alarm known. That's not a consequence of any measure that Donald Trump has just imposed. It's a consequence of the accumulation of strains following 3.5 years of very severe sanctions, in addition to and compounded by the strains and costs of a major war that Russia didn't expect to have to fight. Putin thought his victory would come in a matter of days. He did not expect to have to fight a long war, the biggest and most serious war that Russia has fought since the Second World War, vastly exceeding, for example, the 10 years in Afghanistan in the 1980s. That was small beer compared to what Russia has been fighting in Ukraine. And yes, if you put those two together, you put together also with that the fact that Europe's own sanctions on Russia have been intensifying. There are signs of real growing strains. This is not yet acute and critical and catastrophic, but it is chronic, cumulative, and imposing more and more difficult choices. There is much further to go. For all of their differences in approach now, the Europeans and Americans at least have converged on understanding that the key to imposing stresses and constraints on Putin is by constraining his access to petrodollar revenues. Oil exports are the lifeblood of Russia's economy. And we've seen historically, every time Russia's oil revenues fall drastically, Russia finds itself in trouble very quickly. That was true in 1988. That helped lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union, became insolvent. 1998, which led to the default of Russia, and 2008, where oil prices collapsed as a consequence of the global financial crash.
No.
That was less severe, more temporary, created fewer difficulties, but it did create difficulties. The real fear for Russia now, if the West can engineer this, is a sustained long-term fall in the lifeblood, those daily petrodollar revenues that Russia relies upon to fuel its war economy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. That was Dr. Nigel Gould from the International Institute for Strategic Studies.